Okay, look at that.
Where's the index.html? Did you hide it somehow?
No, we had 4 different HTML files. So you were working in each individual HTML file, correct?
But when you run, when you go run servers, they takes you to the.
You just open any HTML file.
So
You right click, open a live reload server, and it opens that H.
What about if you go to CSS Flexbox and run it? Here.
But yeah, you don't do that. You click on the individual
That's
files.
what I did. It took
Yeah.
me to the
No,
GUI.
They don't do that. No, click on the individual files.
Did you run it still?
No, but I'm telling you, you don't do that. You click on the individual HTML files, you open them.
So we don't need to run.
You should always right click on the individual HTML file.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a look at the code. So we won't necessarily do the code reading for the HTML. We'll just do some code reading for CSS, and then we'll take a look at each one individually. So inside of our HTML, we have this card deck. So as we were talking about with tables and websites are just a collection of rows and columns. That's all websites are. So we have this card deck, this kind of acting as our row, everything's shoved inside of this card deck. And then we have these card wrappers, which are just containing all of our Pokemon cards and whatnot. Here's where we have our CSS. So Rukaya, could you start us off? Could you do 12 through 15?
On line 12, we have a new CSS rule set selecting the ID card deck with an opening curly brace. On line 13, we have the display property with the value of flex. On line 14, we have the padding property with the value of 0.5 rem. On line 15, we have the closing curly brace.
Perfect. Thank you, Rukaya. Noah, could you do 17 to 19?
There's this on line 17. There's this the special rule.
A CSS rule set.
A CSS rule set for the class card wrapper. Padding, increasing the padding by 0.5 rem.
Remember to call out those line numbers.
Line 18, and
so the padding property as a value of
the padding property. So the value of 0.5 rem of the property padding. Line 19, the closing curly braces.
Perfect. Awesome. So let's open up this one. All right. So Flexbox is all about this parent-child relationship. So you can see, as I was talking about, our websites are a collection of rows and columns. So in this case, we have our card deck, which is kind of acting as our row. It's our kind of full set of horizontal space. Inside of our card deck, we have these card wrappers, and these are kind of like our columns. So in this case, it's kind of like we have a 1 row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 column layouts. So when you apply display flex, what it's going to do is it's going to take all of its children and it's all going to align them on one line. So as soon as I get rid of the display flex, you can see, well, now all of my card wrappers are stacked on top of each other because all of these are divs and divs are block level elements. And so by default, our div elements are going to take up the full width and then they're going to stack on top of each other. As soon as I give their parent display flex, well, now it takes all of its children, regardless of its display block, and now it's all going to take them and it's going to appear on one line. And it will stay that way. So if I keep adding more, so let's say I have more card wrappers, and let's just say that I spammed it. I go on back, you can see that it's still all on one line. It'll shrink our content to make sure that it's all just staying together on one line. So it'll dynamically keep on updating for us. And yeah, no.
Is this because of the wrapper, right? Flex wrapper?
It's because I have display flex on their parent. As soon as I got rid of display flex, then you can see they'll all stack on top of each other.
I thought it's so flex wrap is when you say
flex wrap is how I get them to wrap onto a new line, which we'll talk about in the next slide.
It's flex wrap, like if it's squeezed together, they try to squeeze it to fit them inside.
We'll talk about it in the next file. Yeah. This one just display flex.
Okay.
But any specific questions on this file? Display flex, why we did what we're doing here, how this is working? Okay.
So the padding that we've given 0.5 rem, that is relative, right? So that is relative to the body. I mean, I don't understand that.
You're saying when I'm doing 0.5 rem?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is saying it's relative to whatever the font size is of my HTML, which is 16 pixels. And so when I'm saying 0.5, I'm essentially just saying half of 16. So this would be, if we were to look at the computed, we could see that the padding is just 8.
I thought we were only using rem for font size. I didn't know we could use it for padding as well.
Oh yeah, you could definitely use it for padding. So in the LMS,
The effective CSS.
yes.
Load up.
Yeah, I would pull up the, oh, is it not working for you?
Oh, it's working for you?
But yeah, if you pull up, here, let me sign in as a student real quick.
So I have
So
it.
on your end, this is what you should see, right?
Oh, I see. It's a good
And then if you open this up, it should take you to the effective CSS guide. If it doesn't, please let me know, and then I can work on it.
That's the old link, I guess.
Yeah, but down here it'll go and it says margin, and it'll tell you about the 3 different things. So with margin, actually the most common ones you're always going to use is you're always going to use rem or percents. Percents you kind of actually want to avoid. It's a mistake that a lot of new people will use because you're so used to using percents with widths and whatnot. But with margin, it's actually recommended that you do use rem. And it helps you to like avoid large values. So in theory, your margin should be between like 1 and 5 rem. If you find yourself needing to do something more than 5 rem, then you're usually doing something kind of very hacky to get it into place. But 5 rem, if you think about what is 5 times 16, so that'd be like 80. So rather than having to write out like 80 pixels, it's kind of easier to work with like a lower value with like 4 or 5. So, but yes, can use technically any unit of measurement, but we most likely will use rem for padding, or at least I will use rem for padding.
This is for the CSS guide on the website.
Yes.
Is it will like a scaling?
Any other questions specifically about display flex? We'll talk about the other ones individually. Okay, then let's go to the next file. So flex wrap. Caroline, could you do 12 through 16, please?
Okay. On line 12, there's a new CSS style rule set. Selecting the ID card deck with the opening curly brace. On line 13, there's a display property value of flex. On line 14, there's the flex wrap property with the value of wrap. On line 15, there's the padding property with the value of 0.5 rem. And on line 16, there's the closing curly brace.
Perfect, thank you. Line 18, there's a new CSS rule set for the class card wrapper with an opening curly brace for the declaration block. Line 19, the flex basis property has a value of calc 100% divided by 6. On line 20, the padding property has a value of 0.5 rem. And then on 21, we have our closing curly brace. Let's open this one up.
So you divide it by 6 because we have a six thing or what?
6 columns, exactly.
6 columns.
Yep. So exact same flow as the last exercise. My card deck is acting as my row, and my card wrapper is acting as my individual columns. So what flex wrap is going to do is it's going to say as soon as our content starts filling up the full available width, it's going to start wrapping that content underneath. So you can see right here, I'm setting the width essentially by this flex basis. So by me having a flex basis in the card wrapper, I'm essentially saying how big I want these columns to be. You can think about flex basis as the equivalent to width. So you could actually use width instead if that makes more sense to you. It's the exact same thing. But I'm essentially saying, okay, how big do I want my card wrappers to be? Well, I want to take up 100% of the available space and divide that by 6, which is how I get my 6 columns. If I were to do 3, then now you can see that I get 3 columns. 2, yeah, I'll get to you in a second. 4, 5. So it just makes it easy so that way I'm always saying 100% divided by 5. We haven't covered responsiveness, but then it also is helpful in that sense too, because it'll still always maintain that width according to the page. And now I'm saying regardless of whatever my screen size is, always take 100% and divide it by 5. But that's where we're using our width to set the column size. No?
Okay, can we use can we use justify content? Well, like instead of doing the called 100 over.
No, that's justify content just moves your items. It doesn't say how big your items are. This is setting the actual size of our columns.
Because it's fit the content if you do it, no? The
Justify content just moves. It doesn't say how big the content should be. It just moves the content.
So if you have like 3 contents, it's gonna fit the 3 content. If we do it like justify content, and then we're gonna put center, so it's gonna move them to the center, right?
Yep.
And if we put like a space around, it's gonna be like
Yep, we'll talk about that in the next file.
Okay.
Yeah, Caroline.
So what surprised me was that I realized that actually what we apply to the parent and what we apply to the child dictates how those elements are going to be moving around.
Yep.
It's the relationship that these two have in the Flexbox that will determine.
Yeah, I mean, HTML in general, HTML is all about that parent-child relationship. You know, we have divs. Inside of those divs, they have content. We have ULs. Inside of those ULs, they have LIs. Inside of those LIs, they have. So all of HTML is this parent-child relationship. But especially when it comes to Flexbox, it's really about this parent-child relationship because we have some parent properties and we have some child properties. Like in this instance, display flex and flex wrap are parent properties. They need to be applied to the parent element of where I want to have all my children together. Whereas in something like flex basis, this is a child property. I don't apply. See, let's get rid of our flex basis and let's try to apply our flex basis here. You see, I can't apply flex basis right here. And it's saying the display block property on the parent element prevents flex basis from having an effect. So this is saying, hey, the parent of me does not have display flex, which is the body. So this is why flex basis has to get applied on our card wrappers, because who is the card wrapper's parent? Card deck. And card deck has a display flex being applied. So yeah, but very important, that parent-child relationship.
And also in the Flexbox, knowing which specifically belong to the children and which specifically for the parents.
Yeah, so if we pull up that and I'll get to you in a second, Rukaya, but if we pull up the that cheat sheet that I think we linked, let's see, where was it? Right here. So this cheat sheet right here, and we also have the poster here in person as well. But if you look, you can see everything on the left is a property for the parents. Everything on the right is a property for the children. So just based off of this cheat sheet, you know what side of the website it is on. You know if it should be getting applied to the parent versus the child. So for instance, display, well, display has to get applied to the parents. Well, where we were working with the flex basis, well, flex basis gets applied to the child. It's over on the right. Justify content, it's on the left, it's a parent. Yeah.
And also the parents has the responsibility for the container, and then the children are just the items.
Yes, so our parent is our row. So we're gonna say, you know, I want to create this whole new row, and our children are our columns in our rows.
Thank you.
Well, where to access this for the parent?
It's in the instructions. Right here, you use the Flexbox cheat sheet. Okay.
So without the flex basis, how is it decided? Like how there'll be how many rows basically?
How is
like,
it?
So how is it determined that there'll be how many columns? Sorry.
It's just going to be based off of however wide this is by itself. So you can see that like this card wrapper has a width of 509 by 513. So it's just going to say by default, how big our content is. So in this case, you can see it tried to fit 3, but it wouldn't be able to fit this 4th one on one line. So that's why I pushed it over. So it's essentially just going to figure out, okay, how much space is this taking up by default? Let me try to fit as many of those together on one line as I can in the available screen size. And if those don't match anymore, then I'll start pushing them over. So it's not resizing them at all. It's letting the content dictate. So because these images have a certain size, that's what's making them so big by default.
Okay, and with flex basis, it is resizing the content.
Exactly. So with flex basis, I'm specifically telling my card wrapper how big I want them to be. I want them to be in columns of 5. So then it'll automatically adjust the width and the content to divvy that up to adjust the sizing to make the columns of 5.
Okay. Also, can you explain order, please?
Auto, where do you see
It was in that, it was in the cheat sheet where we were doing it.
Pull it up.
Yeah. It was, I think it went up.
Or flex basis right here?
Oh no, order.
Order.
Oh, order. Oh, so order, it allows you to change where you want your children to appear. So for instance, so by default, the flex items are laid out in the source order, meaning in my DOM, this is going to be the first child, this is going to be the second child, this is going to be the third child. So the first one to be on the left. Order would allow me to like swap it. So maybe I wanted my first one to actually be last. Well, that's how I could use order. So let's say change anything? No. Forget. Order by default, flex items laid out in the source order, however the.
Is it because like axis one left is a -1, the middle 0, and then 1, 2, dividing them on the x-axis?
Yeah, I'm gonna get it to actually change.
You probably did not choose the class item.
No, I put it on the right class. I'm
But
just trying.
for all of them, probably need to choose one.
Oh,
of the
you're right.
5.
Yeah, you might be right. Yep. So let me try doing. Yeah. So now you can see I changed this individual one to be order by 5. And now you can see it's all the way down here at the last one. So you can use order. So let's say I gave this one an order of 4. And now you can see that it appears right before. So you could just use order to give them kind of like a custom order of how you'd want them appear rather than how they would appear based off of where they were in the
Order
DOM.
4. So this is it. So when you put order 5 on the first card.
The default 0. So whatever 0 is, that's going to be the first one to appear. And however high you go, it's going to keep adding it to the end.
So
So now if I gave this in order of 6, now you can see that that's the last one.
I think so this is the third card or the card wrapper?
Yes.
This is
So
the third.
if I didn't give them an order, this should be the third one appearing right now. But because I gave this an order and it currently has the highest number out of all of these, then that's why it's appearing last.
Does this depend on the number of column?
No, it depends on the number of orders.
Order, so there's no column.
Well, both. I mean, based off of the number of columns, it'll appear last, but it'll only appear wherever you tell it to based off of whatever order you give it. We got it?
So you haven't done this in CSS. You've given it an inline style, is it? Because here you're giving it to the div, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, in theory, if I were to write this another way, I would have given this a different class and I would have applied it to the class. But just for like testing purposes in the console, I just wrote it right here, which applies it via inline styling. But if I would have written the solution more elegantly, what I would have done is I would have probably created a class and said like order 5 or whatever, and then I would have applied that styling to that class.
But then how would we give the flex basis and the padding to all of them if they were all a different class? Then we would have to give it individually?
You would just give some individual classes. So like this one, so card wrapper, order 5, order 6, order 7. And now let's go to our CSS. Did I put a hyphen? Which one I did?
Number 5. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're talking about.
Okay.
And
So,
then sorry.
no,
We'd have to give the padding and everything here, right? Then the flex
Nope.
base padding.
Because it's already applied to the card wrapper.
But we just changed our class names, right?
It has two different classes now. So now you can see it has one class card wrapper, one class order 5. And now you can see it has all of the styles that are being applied from the card wrapper, and it has all the styles that are being applied from order 5. So elements can have as many classes as possible. Like, I mean, if you look at my, that's not what I wanted to do. If you look at my website, look at how many classes these have. All these things. You can see it has flex row and it has text 2XL, font semi-bold. And so all these classes are applying individual styling. And so you can still give an element a unique class and you only apply styling uniquely to that one element. And this is kind of our conversation yesterday where you were asking me about like what attributes, like when do I give something a class and an ID. This is why I said like it kind of depends and I do it in progress because I'll be writing my code and then I realize, oh, I need a unique way of applying styling to this element. Let me give it a class and then let me go apply styling to that element.
This question, so you created these 3 classes, the order 5 and 6 and 7. So on order 5, you put order number 5.
Yep, so now you can see that that one's here, my order 6 is here, and my order 7 is here. Even though in theory, in my HTML, this should have been appearing first, this should have been appearing second, and this should have been appearing third, but they're not because I changed the order. As soon as I click off the order, you can see the Bulbasaur jumps to the first one.
So you specified order, okay, B number 5.
I didn't say B number 5. I said, based off of all of the other orders of my children, place it after that. So since I have not set an order on this, the default is 0. The default of this is 0. The default of this is 0. So when I say order 5, since 5 is greater than 0, it's going to appear after all of these other ones because their default is 0.
Oh.
So I'm not telling it to be the 5th column. I'm just saying, based off of all of my columns, whatever their order number is, order them according to that. Since all of these are 0, they will always appear before these that have a specific.
So if you go to the div right after order 7, so this one here, can I see what the location? So this one is here. What about order 7?
All the way down here.
So it's not based on column, it's based on
That's what I'm saying.
Priority.
This is by default order 0. The default order is 0. So since this has 0, this has 0, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0, these are always going to appear in this order. Then once we've finished rendering all the ordered zeros based off of how they appeared in the DOM, we will then start looking for the ones that have a different order. So now since this is in order 5, this one goes. Then goes this. If I change this, so if I made this in order 6, and if I made this in order 5, you can see now they swapped. Because now 5 is lower than 6.
And this is only applied for it's anytime we can do this to order, right? Yeah.
Only with Flex.
Only
Only when
with
we're using
Flex.
Flex, but yeah. I don't use order all that often because like if I need to change how I want my items to appear, I'll just change them in my HTML. Like I don't see why complicate it and like mess around with it in CSS. It's like to me it's like the way that it makes sense. Like if it appears first in the DOM, it should appear first on the page. So like I don't really use order all that often. I would rather just change my HTML. But to each their own.
Okay, yeah, I have a question. So we just question regarding the parent and the child. So when you put on, for example, like on padding 0.5 RAM, the card wrapper is applied only for each individual card, right? Yeah.
Each card wrapper, yeah.
Each card wrapper. But if you put the 0.5 RAM padding and the parent, for example, is going to change the whole
Yes.
thing, right?
Which has the padding right here. So you can see when I hover over it, the peach
like
on the
whole
left
thing.
and the right, it's applying to the whole row.
So if you try to move it, for example, like increase, for example, the margin. Is it gonna move the whole, it's gonna move the whole thing to the right? Yeah, it's moving the whole thing,
Yeah.
not only the individual.
Yep, because I'm applying it to the card deck.
But if you put margin on the individual child, it's gonna separate the childs from each other. If you put margin. And why did you put, so why did you put box sizing?
That we, our CSS box model exercise. I'd say go back and watch it, because we have a lot of ground to cover, so we can't necessarily go back
So
and,
did you put the lecture?
we talked about box model, yep.
Let's see the lecture.
Any other questions about flex wrap? Obviously, if I got rid of the flex wrap, then you can see everything's gonna go back on one line. But flex wrap will then allow, once our children fill up all of the available space, then it'll start pushing them down onto that new line. Any questions about flex wrap?
If you wanna access, the box sizing lecture, is it on the guide?
It's on the YouTube playlist, which is pinned in the Slack channel, where I show all of our important announcements. All right, let's take a look at justified content. So we on line 12, there's a new CSS rule set for the ID card deck with an opening curly brace. On line 13, the display property has a value of flex. On line 14, the justified content property has a value of center. And then on line 15, the padding property has a value of 0.5 rem. And then on line 16, the closing curly brace. Caroline, did you do 18 through 21?
On line 18, there's a new CSS style rule set selecting the class property card wrapper with an opening curly brace. On line 19, there's the flex spaces property with the value of 25%. On line 20, there's the padding property with the value of 0.5 rem. Line 21, there's the closing curly brace.
Awesome. Thank you. Take a look. Let me open up this one. So when we inspect this, so same exact flow as all of our other ones. We still have our card deck, which is acting as our row, and then we have our card wrappers, which are acting as our children. We're making them have a flex basis of 25%. So that way there's still some available space left. So when I hover over the card deck, you can see on the left and the right of my columns, there's kind of like these blue dotted lines. This is showing me the available space that I have to work with. So this is saying this is as wide as my row is. This is as wide as my card deck is, but my children aren't taking up any of that space in those blue dotted lines. So this is where it's saying I can use justified content to move our items around. So I get rid of the justified content center. You can see all my items are to the left, and then I have all those dotted lines over on the right. So it's saying, hey, you have all this available space over on the right that we can go and work with. When I center them, it'll center them out. So justify content only works on the primary axis, which by default is going to be horizontal. So by default, our primary axis is going to be left and right. So center will center them horizontally. We have end, which will push them to the end of their container. Same with the flex end. Let me move these cameras so that way. Click right here. Flex start left, also same thing, just kind of on the opposite sides, pushing them to the beginning. Right, I don't know why they have so many that are like similar. Like I don't know why they have flex end and they have right and flex start and left, but we have space around. So now you can see that it's adding space around each of my children. So it has that space on the left side of the card. It has that space on the right side of the card. So it's completely adding space all around our children. We have space between, where you can see it's only going to add space between our columns now. So I lost all of that blue dotted lines on the right and the left of the card on the end ones. And now I only have the ones in between. space evenly. So now this is taking all of the available space in the whole row and it's dividing it evenly between them. And then just a few other kind of random nonsense ones. So you got a few different options depending on how you want them to appear, but justify content allows us to easily be able to kind of center or move our content around horizontally as long as our flex direction is correct. So if you think back to that brochure form and how we had to center like the whole brochure form in the center of the page, well, now we could have done that with Flexbox. We could have, had the whole thing display flex, center it, and then have gotten it in. Something to keep in mind with justify content. Justify content will only work if you have space to move things. So you can see when I hover over the card deck, you see I have those blue dotted lines because I have available space. If my children were already taking up the full width of the page, you can see I hover over the card deck, I don't have any dotted lines, right? So if I change my justify content, you see it's not doing anything because my children are already taking up the full width of the page. So I don't have any more available space to be able to move them. There's just something to keep in mind. You may be trying to add a justify content and you're wondering why it's not working. And it's probably because your children are already taking up the full width of the row. And so you don't have any more available space to be able to move them around. Whereas then as soon as why, when I set it to flex basis 25%, well, 25, 50, 75, I still have 25% available left to work with, which is why now I still have that available space to be able to move items around.
Okay, can you do, instead of doing the divide on 6, can we do it divide, there's like a divide evenly, if you put content, justify content, divide evenly.
Which one?
There's
Space
like-
evenly?
Yeah, space evenly. Oh yeah, it's nothing. So we need to put justify content on the children's side, so we can.
No, justify content goes on the parent.
Sorry, the other one, the basis something.
Flex basis?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we set our column size. Flex basis or width. You could use either one. Any questions about justify content? Okay, let's check out the align items. Just for the sake of time, we'll just kind of open it up and talk about it, but same exact flow, except we only have one card here. We have display flex, we're justifying it in the center, and what we're also using is we're also using align items to justify it vertically on our page. So let's go ahead and let's open this one up.
For a line item, it's vertical, not a.
Well, it depends on which your axis, yeah. So it works on the cross axis. So let me move this over
What
here.
is the cross axis, like across?
Yeah, so by default, our primary axis is horizontal. And by default, the cross axis is vertical.
Oh,
By default. So by default, primary, horizontal, cross, vertical. So I have display flex, align items, justify content center. So we just talked about justify content center. It moves things on our primary axis, which by default is going to be horizontal. Align items works on our cross axis, which by default is going to be vertical. So now you can see as I change my center and my flex end and all of these, it'll move them to the top, to the middle, or to the bottom. If you remember in the last thing that I just talked about justify content, right? I said justify content will only work if you had available space to move it. Same thing with align items. So you can see over here, I had to do a min width 100 VH. If I click that off, and if I try to change my align items, see nothing's working. Because what is my card deck? I'm already taking up the full height of my card deck. I have no available height to be able to move things around. Which is why in this example, I specifically needed to give it that min height so that I told my deck to take up the full width of the page, which then gave me more room to be able to move things around. So just important thing to note with the align items, just like with the justify content, if you're wondering why it's not actually moving things around, It's probably because you're already taking up the full height of the parent and you don't have any more available height to work with.
And the minimum height, is that applying the space in the container?
Yes, I'm applying it to the card deck.
To the
So this
card
whole
deck?
row, so this whole row has a minimum height of 100 VH now. Yeah. Not saying you necessarily usually do this specifically for this exercise. That's why I had to do that. But just knowing that align items and justify content will only work if there is space to be able to move up.
Theoretically, is there any space if there was another row below it, it would get pushed down? Or would it cover on top and move to our?
If I didn't have a min height, then I wouldn't have any. If I had a min height, then the new row would be like underneath this
It would
page.
push it
And I would,
down?
yeah.
So that's giving it a height, so in order.
Not necessarily you need to set a height. It's just like this is why I had to show this in the example. You're not necessarily going to go around and give everything a min height. I'm just saying purely for this exercise, that's why I had to do that to show how align items would work.
So like in general, just put it in the middle in the center so we can move it up and bottom, right?
If you wanted it to be center, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or like if you put it at the end too, so if you put align items, there's like a value told. And start end or start.
Yep.
So if you put it at the end,
Mhm.
you put height to the B in the center, you can still move it, but in
You can still move it, yeah.
in the vertical axis.
Yeah. You could, yeah. Trey? And then if you wanna, did you ask it in the chat? Let me see, I'll pull it up. Will VH always be the size of the browser window? Yeah, so VH stands for viewport height. So it'll always be 100% or 100 of whatever your viewport is. So whether that's 100 of a laptop, 100 of a phone, 100 of a desktop, it'll always be whatever 100 height of that screen is.
This is where I put it with the height. Okay.
One other thing with align items, so we talked about justify content works on the primary axis, align items works on the cross axis. Well, you can change your flex direction. So by default, the flex direction is row. If I change my flex direction to column, well, now I just swapped which way the axis is correlating. So now my primary axis is actually vertical because I said that my flex direction is a column. So now when I change my justify content, you can actually see that my justify content is moving things up and down.
Yeah.
And now when I change my align items, you can see my align items is actually moving things left and right. So it depends on what your flex direction is. Your flex direction is what's responsible for setting your axes. So if your flex direction is a row, then that means your primary axis is horizontal and your cross axis is vertical. If you justify if your flex direction is set to column, then that means that your primary axis is vertical and then your cross axis is horizontal. Any questions before we check out the quiz questions?
I've noticed that it's helpful to use the display flex like little box over there because you can click on that. Is that if we're in some sort of dilemma, a good way to figure out what needs to be applied?
Yeah, I just it's doing the same thing I do, where I just kind of just go through and I just kind of hit through all of them, but you can do it. You can do this too. Yeah, you can play around with it. And, Check out the quiz questions. Noah, can you tell me what is the default flex direction of a flex container?
Flex direction is horizontal.
Yes, so that would be row. So the default flex direction is row.
Is row.
Yeah, that's what the actual value is. So the default flex direction is row. Trey in the chat, what is the default flex wrap of a flex container? No wrap. Yep, exactly. So no wrap is by default. So by default, none of our children are ever going to wrap. They're always just going to appear on one line unless we specify otherwise. Rukaya, which axis do the justify content properties work on?
On the main axis, unless we've set it to unless we've set the flex direction to column.
Yeah, so it's still, well, if we set the flex direction to the column, it's still working on the main axis. I'm just changing what is my main axis. Is my
Right.
main axis vertical or horizontal? But yes, exactly. So justify content will always work on our main or our primary axis. Whereas in Caroline, which axis do the align items properties work on?
They work on the cross axis.
Yeah, they work on the cross axis. Awesome. Definitely a very, very, very useful tool. You're going to use Flexbox probably every single day in the rest of your CSS career. So you'll get lots of practice with it. Definitely, if you haven't finished Froggy, play through Froggy. The zombies one can be a nice one, but definitely getting comfortable with Flexbox will be helpful. We'll have more exercises, obviously, where we'll still working with it. But any questions before we move on?
I'm trying to access the